Imagine finding a treasure at the bottom of the ocean. Except the treasure is a single, giant stone donut. And you can't move it. You can't touch it. You can't even see it most of the time. Yet, for centuries, a stone exactly like that, lost in a storm and sitting silently on the seafloor, paid for weddings, settled blood feuds, and determined the wealth of entire families. How is that possible? How can a rock that is functionally gone still be considered money? The answer to that question uncovers a secret that's been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. It completely changes how you see the numbers in your bank account, the plastic in your wallet, and the very fabric of our global economy. Today, we're not just telling a story. We're opening a case file on the most fundamental technology humans ever invented. Not fire, not the wheel. The technology of belief. Our investigation begins in the quiet, impossibly blue waters of Micronesia. Your breath is a slow, rhythmic hiss in the regulator. Your light cuts a clean path through the hazy water, illuminating a blizzard of suspended sand. And then it appears. Materializing from the murky depths is a pale disk of limestone, the color of ancient bone. It's as wide as a car tire, and it's pierced cleanly through the heart. You're floating before a rice stone. And this one has a ghost story. To understand its power, you have to understand the ordeal of its birth. And for that, we have to travel back in time and over 400 miles of open, unforgiving ocean. Exhibit A, the ledger on the seafloor. This story doesn't start on the island of Yap, where these stones were used. It starts on Palau, where they were born. The men of Yap would sail there in canoes, a fleet of wood and woven fiber against the vast Pacific. They arrived not as conquerors, but as supplicants. They had to negotiate with the Palauan chiefs, offering gifts and labor, just for the permission to quarry the limestone cliffs. Imagine the scene. You're chipping away at a cliff face with tools made of shell and stone. The tropical sun is relentless. The work is backbreaking, a symphony of rhythmic tapping and shattering rock, dust filling your lungs. For weeks, maybe months, you and your kinsmen labor, slowly coaxing this perfect circle from the living rock. Failure meant shame. Injury was common. Death was a real possibility. And that was the easy part. The real test was getting it home. The finished disc, weighing hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds, was lashed to the spars of an outrigger canoe. Then you pushed off, reading the trade winds, navigating by the stars, and the feel of the ocean swell against the hull. You were a tiny speck of wood and courage on an endless expanse of blue. Now, let's talk about our specific stone. The one resting in the silt. The crew that carved it did everything right. The negotiations were successful, the quarrying was perfect. They set sail for home, their spirits high. And then the sky turned black. The sea, their highway, became a monster. Waves crashed over the canoe, winds tore at the sail. The stone, their prize, became an anchor, dragging them down to a certain death. The captain faced an impossible choice: save the stone or save his men. He gave the order. With heavy hearts, they cut the ropes. Their wealth, their proof of bravery, their months of labor, slipped beneath the waves and vanished into the abyss. They made it home, salt-burned, exhausted, and empty-handed. They walked into their village not with a treasure, but with only a story of its loss. They gathered the elders, and they recounted every detail: the journey, the hardship, the storm, the impossible choice. And here, something incredible happens. The village listens. They weigh the ordeal. They honor the bravery. And then, the elders declare a verdict that echoes through history. The stone exists. It was earned. It counts. Think about what that means. A physical object that no one in the village would ever see again was now officially part of the economy. Years later, the family that owned this sunken stone needed to provide a dowry for a wedding. In a public ceremony, they stood up and verbally transferred ownership of the stone at the bottom of the sea to the bride's family. And everyone agreed. The debt was settled. The anthropologist William Henry Furness documented this at the turn of the 20th century. On Yap, value wasn't in the stone itself. It was in the shared memory about the stone. The entire village was a living, breathing, public ledger. You didn't need to move the money. You just needed witnesses. This changes everything. If a community's memory can give value to a ghost, then what really is money? Let's collect more evidence. Exhibit B, the shells that ruled the world. Let's zoom out from one island to the vast trade routes of the ancient world. For thousands of years, one of the most successful currencies on Earth wasn't gold or silver. It was this, the cowrie shell. Specifically, Cypria moneta. Small, glossy, and satisfying to hold. They were harvested primarily in the Maldives, in the Indian Ocean. And from there, they began a journey that would rival any spice or silk. They traveled in sacks on camelback across Asia. They were packed in the holds of ships crossing the sea to Africa. Why shells? Well, they had all the right properties. They were durable, portable, and incredibly difficult to counterfeit when your only tools are fire and bone. Nature made each one just different enough, but universally recognizable. That gloss, that curve, that distinctive mouth. It was a brand sealed by evolution. In places like West Africa, in the Kingdom of Dahomey, cowries weren't just trinkets. They were the bedrock of the economy. Taxes were paid in cowries. You could buy food, cloth, tools. A person's life, their bride price, or a fine for a crime was calculated in thousands of shells. The value wasn't arbitrary. It was based on the simple fact that the shells had to travel an immense distance from the ocean to the marketplace. That journey created scarcity, and scarcity creates value. It's the same logic as the yappies sailing to Palau. The effort is the value. But then, outsiders arrived. European merchants with deep-holed ships and a hunger for Africa's resources, slaves, gold, ivory. They saw the cowrie system, but they saw it as an inefficiency to be exploited. So, what did they do? They sailed their giant ships directly to the Maldives, bypassed the ancient, slow-moving trade routes, and bought up cowries by the literal barrelful. Tons and tons of them. They then sailed to the West African coast and flooded the market. It was the economic equivalent of a nuclear bomb. The Europeans could buy anything they wanted for pennies on the dollar, while the locals experienced a catastrophic hyperinflation. Their life savings, priced in shells, became worthless. The Europeans weren't just trading, they were hacking a system of belief. They showed that if you can control the supply, you can control the value. And the communal agreement that had held for centuries? It shattered. The shell's lesson is brutal. A currency is only as strong as the consensus about its scarcity. Break that, and the whole system of trust collapses. But what if you could engineer that scarcity? What if you could make it official? Exhibit C. The paper that became a promise. We travel now to 11th century China, during the Song Dynasty. The economy is booming. Trade is expanding. But there's a problem. Merchants are tired of hauling around massive strings of heavy, clunky copper coins for every transaction. It's inefficient and dangerous. So, clever merchants in the Sichuan province invent a solution: paper receipts. You deposit your heavy coins with a trusted guild, and they give you a paper note, a jiaozi, representing that deposit. It's a claim check. And soon, merchants start trading these claim checks directly, instead of bothering with the actual coins. Sound familiar? This is the birth of paper money. And the government saw its potential immediately. Within decades, the Song Dynasty took over the system. They started issuing the world's first government-backed paper currency. Now, picture holding one of these notes. It's not just any paper. It's made from the bark of the mulberry tree, with a complex blend of fibers you can literally feel under your thumb, like a secret handshake. It's covered in intricate woodblock printing, with elegant brushwork stating its value in strings of coins. And most importantly, it's stamped with a series of bright red seals. The seals of different government officials. Each stamp is a personal guarantee, a vow. This wasn't just paper, it was a physical artifact of state authority. The Song government brilliantly shifted the source of value. It was no longer about the dangerous journey, like with the rice stone, or the natural scarcity, like with the cowrie shell. Now, scarcity was a technology of the state. They controlled the printing plates, which were locked in chests. They created complex rules for redeeming the notes for hard currency. They even put expiration dates on them to manage circulation. And to protect this new system, they used fear. The penalties for counterfeiting were rumored to be horrifyingly creative. The state was sending a clear message: we are the only ones who can make this. If you challenge us, you will pay. For a while, it was a miracle. Commerce flourished. But the temptation proved too great. Facing military pressures from the north, the government did the one thing it promised it wouldn't. It started printing more money than it had in reserves to pay its bills. The red seals were still there, but the promise they represented was being broken. Value began to flutter like a torn banner. And the people learned a hard lesson that we are still learning today: the promise on the paper is only as good as the discipline of the people who run the printer. This exact drama would play out again, centuries later, and on the other side of the world. Exhibit D, Europe's first hangover. Stockholm, Sweden. 1661, the Swedish Empire is running low on its physical currency, heavy plates of copper. A man named Johann Palmstruch founds the Stockholm Banco and has a brilliant idea, inspired by the Chinese. He convinces the Swedish crown to let him issue paper notes, Europe's first official banknotes, as a stand-in for the clunky copper. It's a massive success. The notes are convenient, lightweight, and commerce takes off. Palmstruch is a hero. But then he makes the classic mistake. To stimulate the economy, and maybe make a little extra profit, the bank starts issuing more notes than it has copper to back them up. At first, no one notices. But then, rumors start. People get nervous. They show up at the bank all at once, demanding their copper. The bank run begins. Of course, the bank doesn't have the copper. The system collapses. Palm Stretch is disgraced, the government is embarrassed, and Europe learns firsthand about the exhilarating high and the nauseating crash of paper money. A new central bank rose from the ashes with new, solemn vows about regulation and restraint. The lesson was learned for now. The ghost of Palm Stretch still haunts every central banker on the planet. From a sunken stone to a broken promise, the pattern is getting clearer. But in the 21st century, the witnesses, the promises, and the ledgers all went electric. Exhibit E, the screen and the swarm. Nairobi, Kenya. 2007, we're at a small metal kiosk, painted bright green. The countertop is scratched, there's a ledger ruled in pencil. You hand over a stack of cash that smells faintly of pockets and diesel. The agent behind the counter doesn't put it in a safe. Instead, he picks up a battered Nokia phone and taps on the keypad. A moment later, your own simple phone chirps with a text message. You haven't been given a coin or a note, but you now have money. Your physical cash has been transformed into a number, an entry in the massive database of a telecom company called Safaricom. This system is M-Pesa. Suddenly, value could move at the speed of a text message. People used it to pay rent, to receive their wages, to send money to family hundreds of miles away instantly and safely. Within years, the economic lives of tens of millions of people ran through this system. The witnesses changed again. It wasn't the village elders around a fire. It wasn't government officials with red seals. It was a network of thousands of kiosk agents, cell phone towers, and a corporate server, all silently keeping the score, all agreeing on the numbers. The ledger was now digital. Just 2 years later, in 2009, a different kind of digital ledger appeared. A mysterious software network calling itself Bitcoin. Here, the idea of the witness was pushed to its radical conclusion. Instead of a village or a corporation, the witness became a global swarm of computers, all running the same code, all keeping an identical copy of the ledger. The very first entry in this new ledger, the Genesis block, contains a hidden message, a newspaper headline about British banks on the brink of a bailout. It's a thesis statement, a declaration of intent, nailed to the digital door. This system was born from a deep distrust of the old witnesses, the banks and governments that had broken their promises once again in the 2008 financial crisis. Here, scarcity is purely mathematical. The difficulty of mining a new coin is written into the code itself. The ledger is enforced not by shame or jails, but by the cold, hard logic of cryptography and the collective power of all the computers in the network. And that brings us to today. You tap your phone to a terminal. You scan a QR code. Your thumbprint authorizes a transaction. Every time you do this, you are interacting with one of these systems of belief. Your value lives as an entry on a server at Visa, or PayPal, or Apple, a ghost in the machine, made real only because a crowd of witnesses you will never meet agrees to remember you correctly. So let's step back. Let's look at the evidence laid out on the table. The pattern becomes crystal clear. First, every form of money requires scarcity. For the rice stone, it was the danger of the journey. For cowries, it was the distance from the ocean. For paper, it was the state's control over the printing press. For Bitcoin, it's the computational energy required to mine. Value needs to be hard to create. Second, it requires legibility. Everyone has to agree on what is real and what is fake instantly. The hole in the rice stone, the gloss of the cowrie, the red seal on mulberry paper, a cryptographic signature on the blockchain, the green checkmark on your phone screen. Each is a signal. This is real. This counts. Third, and this is the most important one, it requires transfer by witness. On Yap, the entire village was the vault and the notary. In Song, China, it was the state and its tax collectors. With M-Pesa, it's the telecom servers. With blockchains, it's the global network of nodes. Money doesn't exist in a vacuum. It only has power when the referees agree on the score. So here's the click. The realization that should send a shiver down your spine. Money is not a thing. It's not metal. It's not paper. Money is a memory technology. The stones, the shells, the screens, they are just props. They are physical and digital tokens that allow us to make our shared memories portable, durable, and verifiable. And here is the mirror. The part where this history lesson becomes intensely personal. The vast majority of your wealth, your entire net worth, doesn't physically exist. It lives as glowing numbers on servers you will never visit, stored in rooms you will never enter, cooled by air you will never breathe. your paycheck, your mortgage, your retirement fund. It's all just memory. Phantoms made solid only because the witnesses, the banks, the governments, the protocols, all agree on your story. Think about it. When you enter a PIN, it's a modern red seal. When you get a two-factor authentication code, it's the crisp sound of a magistrate's stamp, verifying your identity. The old rituals are still with us, just dressed in new clothes. And the risks are still there too. Credibility is elastic until it snaps. From palm stretches overprinting to the bank runs of the Great Depression to modern financial crises, we are constantly reminded what our witnesses are really worth. Let's go back one last time to the lagoon. The stone hasn't moved a millimeter. It is as unmoved by our digital panics as it is by the tide. Meanwhile, on the boat above, your phone buzzes in a dry bag. A number in your banking app has changed. And with it, your sense of safety, your plans for the future, your place in the world. Two very different kinds of water, but exactly the same current running underneath it all. Belief recorded. Here's the final verdict from our investigation. Wealth isn't a pile of gold. It is witness trust. That's it. That's the secret. So if your entire modern life runs on these invisible ledgers, your true balance isn't the number on the screen. It's the resilience, the integrity, and the power of the witnesses who remember you. The state, the platform, the protocol, the community. Choose your witnesses wisely.